Today's topic is about managing cash flow and budgeting between med school and the start of residency. Um, there's a few steps, lots of details, lots of things that will be different depending on your situation, but a few primary steps that you should take in order to identify at least the overall structure of how to get from med school to residency with as little financial pain as possible. First is identifying all the important info relative to your transition, and writing it down. So, whatever your last loan disbursement is, and calculating approximately how much money that will be and how long that typically lasts you as far as cost of living and any other any other things that typically come up, because what people tend to run into, from my understanding, is that by June, especially late June, things are pretty strained, and so any money that you have coming in at for your last loan disbursement from school is like really precious, and even when you get it right away, if there's any way to reasonably stretch it farther, um, that's going to be part of the detail. But the primary thing is to identify how much it is and when you get it. Then, once you've matched and you know that you're going to be getting a paycheck at a certain point, it's a good idea to contact the program and current residents to find out when your first paycheck actually gets in your hands. Um, Nearly, most programs, to my understanding, start in July, but there's obviously variation, and there's going to be variation in when the paycheck is actually paid out, because you're going to have to work at least 2 weeks before they're going to cut a check, and there will normally be some processing time from the time at which they cut the check to when you actually get it. So even though it sounds tedious, asking current residents, when do you actually get your checks each month, like about what day of the month, try to identify the endpoint of this bridge. So if you've done that, now you know where you're starting, the date of your last loan disbursement, the amount, and when you're going to get your first paycheck, when it'll actually hit your bank account. Once you have that now you know what time frame you need to fill in. And then you have the dollar amount, the cost of living portion of your student loan, and you can only stretch it so far reasonably, but you should just try to see what is possible at that point. That's when you start to create a budget that's going to extend beyond May when you graduate. And are there things that you could do to adjust to make that money go farther? Maybe, maybe not. But analyzing that is the next step. The third step then, after doing the finding out where the bridge markers actually are, how much money you have to work with from your loan disbursement, is to then identify other sources of cash. If you have savings, you need to figure that in, you add that to the last loan disbursement. If you don't have savings, then obviously you don't have that to add on to, unfortunately. Next is if there's any if you've made any sort of arrangements with relatives for assistance, that can be the case for some families. Identify that and add that to your calculation as far as how much you have to bridge that gap. Third, find out for sure if your program offers moving expenses. Now, I don't think that that's terribly common, and maybe you already know, the programs on your rank list, maybe you already know that they don't, or maybe you know which ones do. But whatever that number is, if it's zero or if it's like $1,000 or $500 or whatever it might be, add that to that base amount. Once you've figured that out, your loan disbursement, savings, assistance from family, and any moving stipend from your program. So those four things, now you've expended all your cash options. Then you have to move on to credit options. And there are two primary ways. First is 0% credit cards, which are not ideal. They're a band-aid for sure. Um, and maybe, part of whether or not you could qualify for that is dependent on if you can, um, if you can, if you have good credit, if you have good enough credit to do that. And that varies, but I believe that you need to have, I think you have to have at least a 675 score in order to get 0% credit cards. It could be lower though, so it's always worth checking to find if that is an option for you. And if it is available to you, then that's something that normally can give you interest-free or interest-free credit on that card for, it could be 6 months, it could be 12 months. And of course, that's going to be a complication later on with your resident salary itself, because that's going to become an expense that you have to absorb. But remember, this is all about surviving this time right now and just making sure that you can get from point A to point B with as little scrambling as possible. And a plan that involves credit cards, because there's no other choice, is better than not having a plan at all. And it's certainly better than not having what you need in order to travel and eat and, get your first month's rent going and all that stuff. Um, and then the second credit option is getting additional loans. Now, those I've heard are not so great. They can be difficult to deal with. The most common one that I've heard residents use is Sally Mae. They all have told me it's a necessary, if it's necessary, it's a necessary evil. It's not great, but it can get you what you need to be able to bridge that gap. So loan disbursement plus what you have in savings plus family assistance, if that applies, plus moving stipend, and then credit options of either a credit card or additional loans from Sally Mae or the like. Once you have identified your best case scenario with those options, now you know what cash you have available in total or what you could access. Now you need to look at your expenses themselves. And you're going to look at living expenses up until when you graduate, what you're going to be doing from graduation until you get to the city where you've matched, and how much it's going to cost for you to live during that time. Travel, food, insurance premiums, utilities, cell phone bills, getting cash for your security deposit for your apartment, and what is required of you, if it's first and last month's rent, or if it's just first month's rent. In all likelihood, it's going to be, it's all. I would venture to say that in many cases it's first month's rent plus first month's rent plus the actual first month. So if it's if you have roommates and you're reducing costs that way, that's a whole nother conversation, or to get down costs by finding out what living situation will work for you, depending on if you're single or if you're married or have a partner, or if you have kids. Those are all going to come into play. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that for those of you that are married and have spouses with an income, either they're further along in medicine or they're in some other industry entirely, that can certainly make the transition easier with their cash flow and with their savings and so forth. But that's also, of course, can affect what sort of place you're going to live in. Maybe you're buying a home. Maybe you're going to be renting a house. The larger your family, obviously, that's more likely. But identify those costs and figure out what everything is going to be, so that, even if it's a really terrible situation, which I know for many it has been, it is so much better to know what you're going to be facing soon. So adding all those expenses up, you might be a little afraid to find out how much it is, but you need to do it. Take the time to write out all the expenses and what is going to be confronting you. And that way you can best approach it. So that's Yeah, that's that portion of what you need to do. And then once you have, calculated all that you have access to and all that's gonna how much it's gonna cost, now you have to see if there's actually enough. And there might be some hard decisions that have to be made. Um, and you know, it's hard to give examples that would apply to everybody because everyone's financial situation is very different. But this is talking about overall your income, and your income is loan disbursement, savings, um, moving stipend, family assistance, assistance or income, plus credit card access, plus Sally Mae loan access. All that is like your income. And now you compare it to your your expenses, which is your cost of living through the end of school, what's going to happen post graduation, graduation costs themselves. There's lots of details. So take a couple hours to make sure that you've thought of all the small details. I know I've heard of students that have to pay an additional fee for graduation, which it's that's hard to swallow. But if it's coming, you got to write it down. And then through June, and when you're actually going to get your paycheck. Is it July 15th? Maybe. Is it July 22nd? Is it July 31st? Is it August 1st? Whatever it is, you got to identify how wide this bridge is so that you know what you're facing. And then, if there's a savings, fantastic. If you're breaking even, great. If you're not, if you're not breaking even, if you're falling short, then you might have to identify things to cut out, even things that you do need. Um, it can be hard for sure, but uh, the best thing you can do is to know what it is that's coming, because financial surprises are the worst. They cause so much stress, and you have so much to focus on now with your skill set, with your training. That's what you're going for. And so doing all this planning now, it will be stressful if things are not an easy transition for you while you're planning. But if you take the time to do it now, you're not going to have so many surprises over the course of the next few months, and you can pay more attention to getting to know your new program, getting to know your new city, um, preparing for your first rotation. There's all these intangible and educational things that your mind can now focus on, even if the financial side just really sucks. At least you know what it is, and you don't have to invest a terrible amount of energy on it once you've planned it out. So that's what I wanted to share with you this month. I wish you all the best of luck as you make this transition. I know you've worked incredibly hard, and of course, I wish you the best of luck with the match.